Yeah, I'm back online. Great. So now move to Assembly Member Garratt. Thank you.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, so when I think about tram safety, I suppose I'm thinking particularly about, you know, the 7 people who were killed and the 19 people who had life-changing injuries. Some of those families I've met, some of those individuals I've met, you know, people who are now missing an arm as a result of that, who are not in the fatality list. So it's a very real, tangible thing, not a sort of theoretical thing for me. And we have an annual sort of memorial event in November down in New Addington, which is to this day very well attended. Thinking about, we've just had the court case, which has taken, I don't want to go into why, but anyway, it's taken a very long time to get there. And we've just had, that has concluded over the last year. So I wondered what you think we've learnt from the Sandilands court case specifically, rather than the RAIB stuff that had been in place for a while. And what would you tell us about that process? Perhaps if we start with TfL. What did the court case do in particular, do you think?
Yeah, thanks. So I think, first of all, look, we'll never forget what happened in 2016, and our thoughts remain with the families and friends of the people that were tragically killed or indeed suffered life-changing injuries. So, and like you, I attend the memorial service every year and intend to do so again when it comes up in November. So I think you're right, we've learnt an awful lot of lessons from not only the investigations that happened, so you know you are aware of all of the things that we've introduced post 2016 in that regard, and now subsequent to the trial, obviously the sentencing remarks contain some things in there which we have to learn from, and we continue to do so, and that's not just for us in London Trams, that's across our industry. And more broadly in TfL as well. So there is work that's being done to reflect on the sentencing remarks from Justice Fraser and see if there's anything else that we can learn and enhance what we're already doing and maybe introduce other bits and pieces as a consequence of what the judge has said. So I think it's another learning experience for us. I sat through all of the trial as well in person and attended the sentencing remarks as well, along with the Commissioner and other senior members of the team, and so we are fully committed to learning from anything that comes out of the sentencing remarks that we can do to further improve the safety of not just the tram network but all of our networks.
Yes, I mean the sentencing remarks that you've mentioned I was going to come on to. I think the thing, I mean they're kind of devastating. For those on the committee who haven't read them, I would really highly recommend reading them. They're not that long compared to some of the reports that we have, and they are very readably written. The thing that comes across, I think, that I get quite angry about is it's not the specific things. You know, I've had meetings with TfL before about the specific things, the automatic braking and all of these sorts of things. I think it's the totality of complacency and negligence that comes across. You know, so and it's the culture. This is the thing that really bothers me. And I suppose my question is, in terms of the cultural issues that get identified, what's changed? And just to sort of bring out, well, they're not really highlights, but for example, the lighting in that section. So you've got this long, straight section in a cutting with bridges. It's dark when the crash happened. It's very early in the morning. The very fast section of the route coming into the very slowest, very tight, dangerous bend. And for years, I think in 2008. A high number of lights in the Sandilands tunnel were not working, and then all the way to 2016 they're still not working, and that's obviously a contributing factor to the fact that drivers are disorientated. Again, in 2008 you've got a senior engineer who says we need some more signing here, we need some more signage here so it's clear to drivers what's going on. Never done. You've got a speedometer on the vehicle that's reading 10 kilometres an hour slower than the actual speed of the vehicle, so it's going 10 kilometres an hour faster than it says that it is. It talks about route hazard assessments and route safety assessments, which perhaps would have flagged up the fact that there's the lack of lighting and the tight bend and the lack of signage. The last one that was done was in 2005, so more than a decade before, and there's a whole series of management safety review panel meetings from 2013 to 2015 where it's constantly minuted that something will be done about this, and all the way up to and including the day of the crash, nothing was ever done about that. So I'm not talking about any one of those individual things, which I'm sure you will tell me have changed. What really bothers me is a culture of an organisation that has those people's lives in its hands that for like 8 years can have a large number of faulty lights and not fix it. So how has the culture that leads to those problems changed since?
Yeah, so I think Ben can talk about how what he's done with the work to change the culture within the operator as well. I can assure you and the rest of the committee that the things you've mentioned that didn't happen prior to the crash in 2016 have all been addressed. And so specifically the issue about risk assessments and Carl mentioned earlier on, there's now a fully comprehensive risk model that's in place that looks at these things in huge detail. Every year we carry out a review of that model. It takes 3 days to look at it specifically. We review hazard events more regularly than that as well. And so the whole way that the risk modelling is looked at on our tramway, and frankly, if I can say, the whole of the light rail sector has changed considerably since 2016. Likewise, whenever things are reported, we fix it as quick as we can. The lighting, for instance, in fact, we actually, in the last couple of weeks, we had an issue with the lights not actually in the tunnel, but actually on the embankment after the tunnel. They became defective, and we've looked at that. We've now installed some temporary lights whilst we can work out a fix for a permanent one. So I think every point you've made is completely understood, and listening to it in the sentencing remarks was very difficult to hear. I can assure you, and I said, and everyone else, that the culture that was in existence today deals with the things very quickly to make sure that we don't have an issue where there is a fault that's outstanding for too long, or we don't consider a particular event as something that couldn't happen. That just simply doesn't exist today. And you have my assurances that we have learnt not only from all of the reports that were done into the accident, but also reflecting on the sentencing remarks for the prosecution that happened a couple of months ago as well.
So just say, I'm okay that you mentioned what happened to those, because with the specific incidents, as I say, for me the overriding concern is cultural. Yeah. You know, it's not because you get into closing the door after the stable door after the horse has bolted territory, don't you? We fixed that. What's the next thing that's yeah. And that's about culture, about looking for problems and not looking away. No, and you feel confident that that's better?
I feel absolutely confident it's better for a number of reasons, not least because we're constantly checking for comments that come in from members of the public as well to react to those. Again, that was a specific finding of the report, but that's what you picked up. We constantly ensure our staff feel enabled and able to report instances when they see it. I'll let Ben talk about the just culture introduced in Toll in a second. But absolutely, I'm confident that the culture that exists today allows our staff to report things without fear or favour to make sure we can fix things as quickly as we are able.
Well, so that was actually the final thing I was going to bring up from the sentencing remarks. So there was the incident 9 days before where another tram went on the exact different driver, different tram, same location, and the tram was up on 2 wheels, and a member of the public emailed in to say that she felt it was a sort of near-death experience, which we now know it actually was. She emailed in and nothing seems to have happened from her email, and the driver, him or herself, who was on that earlier vehicle, didn't report it, and the judge's view seems to be it's this culture of blame and the culture of people not wanting to report things like that in case they get blamed for them. It's your fault you were going too fast, and then they get in a disciplinary. So how is that different? Let's imagine a scenario like that where a driver sees something or experiences something. How is that different? Yeah, Ben, if you'd like to. Perhaps that's for you.
So a lot of work's been done within Toll since the incident, and Mark mentioned the customer service role that we have there that deals with all the communications that come through, so there is an active mechanism there very quickly that we can look into those kind of things. I think for us as an operator, it was about how we have a culture where it's, there's an error and a violation. That was something that was perhaps missing, and everybody saw everything was a violation, so that was introduced very early on. We re-emphasised what our just culture was. We did a whole raft of training on just culture and behaviours of staff and management, and that started off as from the exec. So every member of Toll, regardless of what role you do, you sit on the course and you have the course. there's a step change from also how we look at support and development. So if people are making mistakes, is it an error? Are they doing it on purpose? No one will ever want to go out and do anything on purpose. So there we need to look at what sort of support and development individuals need. So we've introduced and just re-emphasise to everybody that it isn't about, oh, they should know better because they were trained 10 years ago and they get assessed every year. This is about why, what's caused, look for, and it comes back to the investigations as well that we do internally, is what was the underlying cause? What was it? We think we know what they did, but why? And it keeps asking those why questions, which is the basis of all kind of sort of root cause analysis training you do. But it's getting people to understand we need to support our staff going forward, we need to give them support and development going forward to prevent reoccurrence of similar sort of incidents where they might make mistakes.
When you talk about staff making mistakes, obviously, possibly that's drivers, possibly it's other people. I mean, the incidents, not to go back over them again, but the incidents I gave, I mean, the lack of lighting, the lack of signing, the lack of, I mean, those aren't driver errors, are they? Those are senior management errors, I would say. So are senior managers involved in this
part
process?
of the training that I said, to say every single manager, you know, every part of my team, all my exec, all of the senior management within ToL have sat the course. We continually talk about it during our exec meetings. We will always, there is now never a situation will arise where what might be in a report and then we fought it the next day and I was okay, we fought it yesterday, that's okay. They don't, because Mark knows I'm on the phone. We have our own internal mechanisms with our own internal meetings that if stuff's not being done or attended to, everyone will continue to report it on a day-to-day basis until it gets resolved.
So that's, because that was what I was going to ask. So how, I'm always a bit sceptical of going on courses to solve a problem. I've been on courses and I've come back from them and I feel like I'm not that changed always. So how do you think about the point of view of a driver? Let's think about that driver who went around that corner too fast. Definitely, you know, the tram has come up on two wheels. How is it the experience of the process different for that driver now versus then? How can they feel confident that if they wanted to report that issue?
Sorry, Assemblyman Garratt, you are now beginning to sort of blur into questions that are further down the line, really.
Which question is about organisational culture? Sorry.
Well, the questions about, well, there are questions further down, number 11, for instance. So let's try and keep to case.
Okay. So in terms of the returning to the judge's sentencing remarks, so those, I mean, I think if, you know, for me, I would perhaps print these out and stick them on my wall. I mean, in terms of what you personally take from them, Ben, you know, what's your sort of big takeaway from the observations of the judge in those sentencing remarks?
So, like Mark mentioned, there's a number of items in there that we will take away and we'll continue to look at how we improve. I think it's something that, for me personally, sitting there listening to what was coming back, much like Mark, it wasn't nice reading. It's understanding that I wasn't within ToL at the time of the incident and joined a couple of years after. So for me, it's about making sure that we instill the practices in the business that we don't experience those again. And it's just that understanding that never rest on laurels, never presume you know everything. And I think sometimes a decision we might make today doesn't have an impact today, but it might have the impact tomorrow. It may not even be tomorrow, it might be months, years ahead. And it's about understanding how we check and balance all the decisions we make collaboratively, asking for support where needed, UK Tram come into that, LRSSB come into that, and other contacts you have. So it's about just ensuring that, you know, we make decisions for the right reasons, but we've tried and done our best to understand. And I think, you know, not letting things slip and slide, like potentially you just mentioned about the lights, for example, not to happen again.
Okay, thanks, Ben. Just quickly then, I don't know whether Carl or James, whether you had any observations on the sentencing, on the court case, the process of the court case, or the outcomes of that, you know, in terms of how that looked from your point of view.
I mean, from our perspective, I reflect on the things that were charged against us from the coroner's preventing future deaths reports. There was a number of things that came against us, and pertinent to your point you was raising there was about the confidential reporting. So we work closely with CIRRUS, for the people who understand CIRRUS, the Confidential Reporting Agency, and produced some documentation material and did a large campaign for all of the sector really about the need for confidential reporting. But I think the thing from the sentence remarks that was sort of touched on briefly, and Mark mentioned it with the reworking of the model. So, some of the things that perhaps hitherto prior to Sandilands wouldn't have maybe sparked the thought process that things do now. So every tramway sits down and it is an exercise for 2 or 3 days to re-look at all those smallest levels of minutiae of precursors that may lead to something. Because it's incumbent on us to then take those, the sort of extremely low frequency, extremely high impact events and try and perceive those if we can, and how we can help the sector to stop those. So I think, yes, you're right what you mentioned about 8 days prior and 9 days, well, whatever that was, I suppose that's that quick it happened, but at least every year, management teams and senior management teams from around the country at every tramway sit down with my team and look at absolute minutiae level of detail, like I say, have we got all these precursors in? Are we seeing other things come through confidential reporting lines, through just cultures that need to go into the precursors? I forget it, there's 70 or 80 precursors we've got. We have 70,000 entries into the model that are being churned out all the while. And so I do believe, and I can't talk obviously intimately for Croydon specifically, but I do believe that senior management teams in the organisations now understand that. They sit in that room for 2 or 3 days every year, and then we give them a dashboard that says, well, actually you're doing quite well, or actually you're doing quite poorly. And I think just one last thing I'll close on is that up until recently, and I don't know whether it's the case or not that's brought this to forefront of people's mind, the pitch was always against the industry average, and actually the industry's now said to us, no, actually we don't want that. We want to know we're all happy to know what each other's doing, because if someone is doing better than us, we want to go and pick up the phone to Manchester and say, how are you doing that? Rather than just be pitched at an industry average. And I take that as a great sort of pleasure that people, an encouragement that people want to know what the best in class are doing, rather than just what's good enough. So I think that's my
That's
answer.
a positive, benchmarking against the best.
Yeah, against the best rather than
average.
just an average, yeah.
Yeah. So in terms of, just quickly on the precursors, is this the business about the accident triangle where you've got things that are very frequent and low impact at the bottom, obviously serious fatal accident at the top, and you drive down the stuff at the bottom and the expectation that the stuff at the top then
won't happen,
doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Carl. I don't know if you wanted to add anything on that, James. If not, then...
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think, from what Carl was saying, it's changed the way the industry approaches it, but there was always the focus generally on you get a lot of like slips, trips and falls. The focus was on that, but actually that's not high impact. It's just changing the way the industry's approached, that understanding of risk. And that's something that is seen across the whole sector. So, let's just reiterate what Carl was saying there and what both Ben and Mark were saying. It's not just within TfL and Toll, it's across the whole sector.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Chair.